watching The Buck Stops Here and I'm Barkhadat. The big story today, 22 days after the tragic passing away of Mufti Mohammad Sayeed, the state shows no signs of clarity as to whether the Mehbooba Mufti and the BJP will join hands together. Although there has been no word on calling of the alliance and the BJP is waiting patiently, today the Mufti family moved out their belongings from the Chief Minister's residence in Jammu. This was seen to be a signal to the BJP that Mehbooba Mufti is certainly in no hurry to form the government or become Chief Minister. With Mehbooba Mufti clearly resetting the terms of her equation with the BJP, it's quite clear that even if the alliance were to resurrect itself, Mehbooba Mufti is not going to play by the rules her father did. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll be looking at what's going on behind the scenes, what's on Mehbooba Mufti's mind. Is the national conference waiting in the wings? Is Mehbooba Mufti apprehensive about political consequences of continuing an alliance with the BJP, and will the once historic alliance soon be history? Let's first go across to my colleague Nazir Masoodi. He's joining us from Srinagar tonight. Nazir, we've seen a statement come out in the last few minutes from the PDP, that's Mehbooba's party, saying no political meaning should be read into the Muftis taking out their belongings from the Chief Minister's residence in Jammu. But as somebody who's there on the ground, why do you believe this decision to be significant?
Well, I think it is a clear indication that Mehbooba Mufti is not in a hurry, and the chances of government formation in Jammu and Kashmir are getting bleak. Mehbooba Mufti has already, given clear indications that she wants more than just forming the government, which includes what she is talking about, fulfilling the vision of her late father, Mufti Mohammad Sayeed. Yes. And if you talk to Mehbooba Mufti, she would say talk about anything other than the government formation, and that is the last thing which is in Mehbooba Mufti's mind. And she talks about the peace, she talks about other social issues, political issues, radicalization, but not the government formation. So she has actually given this sense to, in fact, her all party colleagues that she is not in a hurry. She needs more than some assurance from highest level in the government of India, maybe Prime Minister, BJP President, whether she can actually deliver on the promises which have been made in the agenda.
But Nazir, what's the real story? We did see praise for the Prime Minister. We did see the description of the Prime Minister's visit to Lahore as the best tribute to Mufti Mohammad Sayeed. Nobody is actually confirming or denying whether this alliance will continue. But is Mehbooba Mufti worried about the political consequences of continuing the alliance with the BJP? Because unlike her father, who was in the twilight of his life and could afford to take a political risk, Mehbooba Mufti has an entire political career ahead of her.
Exactly, and we have to see there's a lot of difference between Mufti Mohammad Sayeed and Mehbooba Mufti. Mufti Mohammad Sayeed had a commitment, he had a conviction to, he was actually an Indian Kashmiri, and Mehbooba Mufti is Kashmiri Indian. And she sees things her own way. If she goes with the BJP, that would be the second, commitment to, PDP going with the BJP. But Mufti Mohammad Sayeed himself had called North Pole meeting South Pole. But what is playing in Mehbooba Mufti's mind is certainly how it is having an impact on the political situation and the party's popularity on the ground, which we have seen, in fact, many when there was a very less presence of people at Mufti Mohammad Sayeed's funeral. Then there's also so many things in the PDP which people are talking about. For example, Mufti Mohammad Sayeed was ill. He was at All India Institute of Medical Science in Delhi for 15 days. Prime Minister didn't go and see him there. Instead, when there was Prakash Singh Badal was ill, Prime Minister visited Chandigarh and saw him at the hospital at Chandigarh. So similarly, he could have visited here. That could have reassured Mehbooba Mufti that look, the entire central government and the BJP is behind her. She can take the decision. She can deliver on the agenda of alliance. Perhaps Mehbooba Mufti's biggest fear is that if she forms the government, will she be able to deliver on anything about the promises, be it ASPA, be it the other issues of agenda of alliance, talks with the separatists. Pakistan talks is certainly the call that has been taken by Prime Minister himself, and that credit doesn't go to PDP. That is the fear PDP Mehbooba Mufti has. If she forms the government, will she be able to deliver anything?
Well, I think, Nazir, what is clear is that this decision is not going to come in a hurry, although there is a PDP meeting this weekend. Somehow my sense is we will not see any decision coming in a hurry at all. Thank you so much, Nazir. Let's take it now to our panel, people who know Jammu and Kashmir very, very well. We're joined from Jammu tonight by Anuradha Bhasin Jamwal. She's, of course, the editor with the Kashmir Times. We're also joined by Hina Shafi Bhatt. Hina, of course, contested on a BJP ticket in the Kashmir Valley, is a member of the BJP. And a moment from now, we'll be joined by Dr. Siddiq Wahid, who is, of course, a well-known analyst and academic from Jammu and Kashmir. I'll start with you, Hina. The question remains, is the BJP getting restless in Jammu and Kashmir? There is also the BJP dimension. There is also the Jammu dimension. And they would not be too happy after a sweep by your party in the Jammu region that the state is under governor's rule. So how long are you prepared to wait?
We are sitting calmly and waiting and giving enough time to Mehbooba Mufti to take a decision that either she is going to make an alliance back with BJP or not. We are calmly sitting, watching, because she has her own issues in the party, so we're giving her enough time.
How much time
There is no restlessness from the BJP.
How much time are you willing to give her?
She's asked, I think, more 10th Feb. She's again going to have a meeting with her party people, and then she's going to decide. So whatever she's meeting, she's deciding. We are waiting. The day will come, and she will decide.
So you're saying, Hina, that nobody in the BJP is upset that there has been no visible, in fact, talks even between the BJP and the PDP, even if the alliance has to be reset. We are seeing no dialogue at all between the two parties. We've seen only condolence meetings so far. You're saying the BJP is prepared to give Mehbooba all the time that she needs?
No. Barkha, earlier when we made an alliance, they took a long time. Initially, if you remember how much time they took.
It took 2 months.
And now again, and again Mehbooba Mufti, I'm feeling sad for her loss and for the country as well, for the state as well. But she has to take a decision. It's nothing in our BJP hands that we are eagerly waiting when she'll say yes.
Okay.
It is up to BJP, and we have given a clear 5-year chance from their party for a CM candidate.
But you know, the point
I
will
don't
be,
think
there will
from
be some
BJP
point,
anything is left.
But there will be some point, and let me just get Anuradha and Siddiq Wahid into this now. Anuradha, what is your reading? What is on Mehbooba's mind? Because as I see it, she has a dilemma. If she walks out of the alliance with the BJP, it is like disowning one of the most important decisions that her father took. And, you know, it was a decision which he called the bringing together of the North and the South Pole. And at that time, Mehbooba had called it perhaps one of the most historic decisions since the partition of India. That's how significant she thought it was. How does Mehbooba move forward without disowning the legacy of her father, but still keeping in mind the own electoral future of her party in the valley?
Look, there are definitely dilemmas in her mind. And I won't say Mufti's legacy, because Mufti's legacy goes beyond having taken a decision to enter into an alliance with BJP. He entered into an alliance with BJP because there were limited options at that time. And he had a bigger legacy of peace, of development, of catering to the needs of the people, and bringing them closer to Delhi through means of resolution or through peaceful interventions.
Anuradha, that
However,
still remains the situation.
I mean, that is a legacy. When that is not being fulfilled within the present coalition. Sorry, was there a question?
Yeah, I'm saying that those concerns that Mufti had when he was alive, Mufti Saab had when he was alive, those concerns still remain applicable today. The fact is that any party in Jammu and Kashmir typically needs a comfortable working relationship with the party in Delhi. The fact is that Modi has shown in initiative with Pakistan that Mehbooba Mufti's party is called the best tribute to Mufti Mohammad Sayeed. So all those factors still remain in play.
No, I think that is not enough. No. That's a very limited reading of what has happened in the coalition government. That is not enough. the peace process, of course, there have been hitches, there have been ups and downs, and there have, the BJP has moved back and forward on the peace process. So it's still not very certain where they're headed at the moment. At the moment, it looks good, so it was appreciated. Okay. Apart from the peace process with Pakistan, there have been no moves made within Kashmir. I mean, Mufti's previous rule of 2002 was good. Its USP was because he managed to negotiate with the center to have minimal restrictions, the minimal footprints of militarization in the valley. He could reduce it to some extent, removing the frisking checkpoints, etc., reducing the number of arrests and everything. And this time, as soon as he did have a similar dream, as soon as he started with the promise to release political prisoners, and the whole move was shot down in its infancy by the BJP.
But the fact is, Anuradha,
far from that,
I want to just 1 second. I want to take that to Siddique Wahid first, and then we'll come back to Hina and to you. Siddique Wahid, the fact is that had Mufti lived, he would certainly not have called off the alliance. In fact, till his very sort of last days, he kept praising the Prime Minister. He believed in that alliance, and he also believed that there was no option, because any other combination would have deepened the divide between Jammu and the Kashmir Valley, and that was really important to him. But that still remains the challenge. Other than fresh elections, any other combination but the PDP and the BJP would mean leaving Jammu out of the government substantively. So what are the choices before Mehbooba Siddique?
Well, I mean, choices are very simple. I mean, one is to continue with the alliance, and an alliance that has not worked, an alliance that's which had an agenda that has not been delivered on for well nigh about a year now. The other option is to go to the people and to go back to the people and to ask them as to I mean, go back to the people and have elections again. The third option that you pointed out is forming an alliance with the one of the other parties. That's, again, something that I wouldn't speculate on. I think this is, I mean, because what kind of numbers is it going to throw up? I don't think anybody can guess at the moment.
But Siddique, in fact, PDP sources are now telling us that while the news of the Mufti family moving out their belongings from the Chief Minister's residence in Jammu came out only today, this decision was in fact taken on the 18th, and all the accompanying paraphernalia, official paraphernalia that comes with the Chief Minister's office has also been given up. But of course, the PDP saying in a statement that this is dignified political conduct, and since there is governor's rule, they thought this was the correct thing to do, and no political meaning should be read into it. Do you, however, Siddique, see a political meaning in it? Is there a messaging being sent here to the BJP that Mehbooba is going to reset the terms of the alliance, and she's not especially happy with the way her father was necessarily treated?
Well, listen, I think Mehbooba is a different kind of politician from her father. One is that she's comfortable talking to the people, to a crowd. And she engages with them, and she goes amongst them. She has been, at least. She's not, I don't think, that comfortable with backroom politics, with negotiating deals and so forth, and things. So we have a different sort of leader within the PDP and I think that one has to give some time for that to adjust.
So is your own sense that the alliance will come back, Siddique, very quickly before I go to the others?
I really don't have a sense of it. I don't have any sense of it from everything, but I certainly am of the opinion that there is no rush for this, yes. That whatever time needs to be taken, should be taken.
Hina Shafi, let me get you in. You had famously, as a Kashmir-based politician, as a Kashmiri, you had spoken about, I remember in the campaign saying, if they tamper with 370, I'll even pick up the gun, and then you explained that you didn't mean that literally. The common minimum program between the BJP and the PDP, of course, committed to status quo on 370. I remember Mufti Mohammad Sayeed being absolutely adamant on that. But it also spoke about moving on issues such as the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It spoke about a dialogue with Kashmiri separatists, it spoke about reaching out to Pakistan. I think what Anuradha Bhasin is saying is that we haven't really seen any movement on a domestic peace process, and therefore maybe Mehbooba is not very comfortable without that agenda of alliance being implemented about moving ahead.
Barkha, as everybody is aware that BJP and PDP alliance was a newlywed couple where they were getting adjusted to each other. Still the honeymoon period was not over yet, and we landed into losing Mufti Sahab, and now again rethinking process of Mehbooba ji regarding the alliance. I don't think this is the right way we can take this issue that she was not happy the way we were the way we formed the government, and then things were not working. I think the very little time, this was a very little time where we can predict and we can say that things were really not working and they would have not worked. Very little time where we cannot just say that things were not working according to PDP. PDP very well know that the government was formed on the common minimum program, and whatever points were in the common minimum program, the government was formed according to that. So I don't think there is any other clue or something like Mehbooba ji will ask for more from BJP and BJP will agree to more things she will ask.
But Anuradha, you don't agree with that. You actually don't believe that the agenda of alliance has seen enough progress at all. And Anuradha, I must add that in fact, as more details emerge, we know now that that Mehbooba's mother, of course, Mufti Mohammad Sayeed's wife and the rest of the family not only moved out from the official residence in Jammu on the 18th, but they actually handed back Mufti Mohammad Sayeed's cavalcade and everything that came with the Chief Minister's post well before that. This news coming out today, but all of this happened well before. Does it suggest to you at least one thing, that she is in no hurry to become Chief Minister, that impulse is not going to guide her decision?
I don't think that's going to guide her decision. I mean, they waited well over 2 months earlier when they formed the government, when Mufti Saab formed the government, and I think she's lived under his shadow and has, you know, must be politically mature enough and knows what she's doing. But I would like to go back to the agenda that, you know, earlier I talked about that the government was unable to move on it, and that was not the only reason. The other reasons of suspicion are that the BJP, instead of you know, contributing and accommodating, it refused to shed its old ideology. When BJP enters J&K, it always enters with a certain Hindutva agenda. And this is unlike, this present government is unlike the previous Vajpayee government, which understood that one needs to engage with the mainstream Kashmiri leadership in a certain way so as to dilute the unrest and to and the alienation of the people. There was an understanding during Vajpayee's time. This government instead has allowed the Hindu right wing to create trouble. I mean, right from its day one, the government has been busy firefighting. So whether it was Article 370, whether it was petition on Article 35A, whether it was the state flag issue, it was the beef-related killing, and so on and so forth. You know, so these kind of things create much more suspicion. And I think Mehbooba is fully aware that if Mufti was unable to get more concessions from the center with his kind of power of bargaining, it may be much more difficult for her. So this is an even bigger dilemma.
Siddiq, let me take that to you. I think Anuradha is right that we've seen the kind of controversies that we never used to see before. For example, the fact that Jammu and Kashmir has its, you know, has a state flag that always has sort of coexisted with the national flag. When the government was sworn in and Narendra Modi and Mufti Mohammad Sayeed was sitting there, those two flags were there and nobody made a fuss about it. But now you've seen an eruption over that. You've seen an eruption over political prisoners. You've seen an eruption over the Hurriyat. You know, the kind of issues that Anuradha says did not necessarily make news in Vajpayee's time. That Modi is not going to be Vajpayee on Kashmir. Is that going to prove to be a problem or a factor in Mehbooba's decision making?
it's already a problem, and I wouldn't be surprised if that is what is causing the delay, because what that is contravening the agenda of the alliance. The agenda of the alliance supposedly said, or did say, and was supposedly to be adhered to, and that was that these so-called controversial issues will not be raised.
Yes.
But we've known the BJP agenda on Kashmir for ages. I mean, which is to basically sort of change the political system that Kashmir bargained with vis-a-vis Delhi in the 50s.
Right.
You know, and that they could not stay away from, trying to change that and to destabilize that.
Yeah.
You know, how is anybody going to react to that?
Let me quickly get Mehbooba, I beg your pardon, Hina to come in on that, and last comments from then everybody, 30 seconds each. Hina Shafi, you're a Kashmir-based BJP member. The flag of Jammu and Kashmir, like its separate constitution, this is a constitutional principle. This is not something that the PDP made up. As a Kashmiri with the BJP, why is your party not able to understand this? Why are issues like the flag issues today?
No, it was like from everybody that national flag is important than any other flag. So when everywhere national flag is given importance, so why the other flag is to be placed?
Because that's always been the case. They've always stood side by side.
Yeah, it's been case. Yeah, definitely. But national flag has its importance. So other things are like nothing in front of national flag, I believe.
So this is the point, that how does this ideological divide, very quickly, Anuradha, just a closing comment. What do you think Mehbooba can do? She has to, in a way, honor what her father thought was important, because he did not want the divide between Jammu and Kashmir to widen further, which is why I believe he could not accept any other permutation combination. That still holds today, that dilemma. Other than fresh elections, every other combination throws up the same dilemma. Anuradha.
I'm sure Mehbooba is caught in the situation of damned I do and damned I don't. But she has to take a decision, and she has to take a decision soon. And I think that the sooner that she, this kind of an alliance with the kind of mindset that it has been, you know, going ahead with, especially with respect to center, it is not going to work. So if it's not going to work, it is going to break sooner or later. The sooner it does, it is better for the state, it is better for PDP, which can salvage some of its credibility.
So you're saying the sooner it breaks is better for the PDP, Anuradha?
Yes, definitely. I mean, if they go later, they'll lose much of their credibility. At this time, it's just been a year, they could still salvage it.
All right, Siddiq, very, very quickly, I just want you to come in on the fact that, you know, Mufti Muhammad Sayeed used to say that the Indian constitution was the last word. And I remember he once told me that I have been home minister and everybody knows by conviction I am Indian. But he believed in the Indian constitution was the Article 370 that gave Jammu and Kashmir its special rights. Therefore, the J&K constitution was sacrosanct because it was part of the Indian constitution. You know, so how does he now deal with a situation where the party's partner may be contesting that?
Well, I mean, I think that's why the alliance made no sense right from the beginning. Because when you're going in opposite directions, the chances of meeting are very slim.
Yes.
And I think that's been proven.
Yeah.
And I've never understood that. I've never understood the agenda of the alliance. I've never understood putting all the political issues on the back burner. I've never understood what it means to, you know, sort of be told that you're going to get funds and then not get funds. I mean, none of it has moved. The sort of coalition has not worked. The agendas have not worked.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and in a sense, one's not surprised by this.
Well, there is a significant PDP party meet coming up very, very soon. We'll wait to see if that gives clarity. But my own sense is that Mehbooba Mufti is not in a hurry. She is not going to be driven by the Chief Minister's post. That much is clear. She's to keep an eye on the long-term future of a party. And our panelists even suggesting today that this alliance will break, if not sooner than later. We'll leave it there. Hina Shafi Bhatt, Siddiq Wahid and Anuradha Wasim, thank you for joining us on the Buck Stops here. We'll be taking a quick break. On the other side, the highlights are from our exclusive, which saw the modern day Marx in debate with Team Modinomics. Thomas Piketty was debating Arvind Subramaniam and Vivek Debroy. That's coming up in a moment from now. At a time when there are concerns that the global economy may once again be headed for a slowdown, and there are also concerns over whether Achhe Din are here or still elusive for the economy at home. On this program, we bring you an unusual platform of extremely eminent voices, perhaps covering the left to the right of the ideological spectrum when it comes to economics. An extremely eminent panel indeed, to talk about whether inequality is rising, whether India may yet see reforms, whether reforms are indeed the way ahead, whether wealth creation is necessarily good for growth, and much more. Let me introduce our guest today, starting with Thomas Piketty, of course the author of the seminal work Capital, Arvind Subramaniam, the Chief Economic Advisor, and Vivek Debroy, well-known economist, author, and someone who now is with the Niti Aayog. Welcome all. Let me start with you, Arvind, to give us a perspective of where you see the Indian economy standing today. And I ask you this because in your own mid-year economic review, you actually had to retrace from your original growth projection. You now say it will be between 7 to 7.5%. How worried are you with what's happening in China, with the fact that we're not seeing private sector investment, sentiment really showing positive signs? How concerned are you about the India growth story right now?
Right. Firstly, I just want to clarify that it's true that I revised down the forecast, but remember that there were two really big exogenous factors that forced us to change the forecast. One was that global markets were considerably down relative to when we first forecast that, and we calculate that about at least 1 to 1.3 percentage points of growth was shaved off by the decline in world markets. And second, of course, agriculture didn't do as well as we'd expected. But apart from that, I think the forecast was broadly in line with what we'd said. So that's the first point. The second is that, at this stage when, the world economy seems to be in some amount of turmoil, I think all of us should be worried. I think we should be worried because, China is such a big part of the world economy. It represents a big market, but also, the manner in which anything could happen could spread deflation to the world. So, all of us are going to be affected. But that being said, I think that first, we need to do what we need to do domestically. That's the best defense. Second, I think we are much better cushioned than, most countries in the world. But then, when these headwinds come, they affect all economies and everyone has to be concerned.
But you've actually argued in favor of deferring fiscal consolidation and saying that maybe we have to postpone that process and it is time for the government to begin spending. Why do you think it's important for the government to spend at this point?
Well, I mean, if world demand is down, and we want to maintain the growth engine, then we have to find domestic sources of demand. And the way I like to put it is, I mean, it's a question that we raised, that at a time when global demand is down, when private investment is weak for some historical reasons, should we enact aggressive consolidation at this time? And I'd love to hear Thomas Piketty's views on this, because essentially, Thomas, the question is that should we, under these circumstances, go for aggressive consolidation or not? Because we had promised earlier to reduce the deficit by about 0.5 percentage points of GDP.
You've actually argued, Thomas, that given the gaps and given the inequities in India, this is not the time to focus only on containing the deficit. So how do you see the India story?
Well, first, we should never aggressively consolidate. We should always do it smoothly. But let me put it in a more sort of long-run perspective. I think India needs to cope with inequality. I think if India wants to become a developed country, and I think India has the potential with the energy, the democratic institution to become, the main or one of the main, or maybe the main economic power and political power in this century. But for this, the Indian elites have to understand that the level of inequality that we have in this country, in particular the lack of proper public investment in basic health services, basic education services, basic infrastructure is just not sufficient, and that's not gonna make it. You know, if you the total health budget, public health budget for a country like India right now is around 1% of GDP. So I'm not saying you should become Sweden with 10% of GDP, but China has 3% of GDP. So there's no way you can do the same with 3 times less money. You can do all the reform you want to make the delivery process more efficient, and of course that's important as well. But if you have 3 times less money, so you're not going to make it. So in the West, it took major shocks, major political shocks in the 20th century for the elites to finally accept the kind of social and fiscal reform and that can deliver broad-based investment and equitable growth and sustainable development, which India has not faced yet. And so I think there is a short-run decision of how much you finance by tax, how much you finance by public deficit.
You of course think the rich should be taxed more.
I think in the long run, you need to finance the extra public spending by tax. So, deficit is not going to be the way that India will go from, the tax GDP ratio right now in India is 10%. I think it should be 20%. I think in the next 10 years, it can go up gradually by 1 percentage point of GDP per year and go from 10 to 20.
So what you're saying presents an interesting conversation, Vivek, for us as Indians, because we hear a lot of aspirational India. And we say that we're finally in India where wealth creation is not a bad word, that there was a time when the socialist instinct of India used to look at wealth as a bad word, that we actually celebrated povertarianism. But you actually have Thomas now directly challenging that narrative and actually saying inequality is rising because Indian elites aren't actually willing to contribute their share to the growth of the country. How do you see this essential contradiction between the right and the left?
I don't think it's a contradiction between the right and the left. I think there's a great danger in sweeping generalizations without understanding the context, the data, and the nature and the constitutional nature of India. Take this figure, 10% tax GDP ratio. Is that correct? It's not. That 10% is only union government taxes. The moment I add state government taxes, not even local body taxes, the figure is around 18% of GDP. So it's not 10. About 3.5% is because of exemptions.
Right.
You take away the exemptions, not 3.5, even more. 5% is because of exemptions. You take away the exemptions, then it becomes more than 20%, it becomes 23%. So the argument is one of removing the tax exemptions on the personal income side, on the corporate side. It's not a problem with the corporate tax rate. The problem is with the effective corporate tax rate. So the agenda is not whether the tax GDP ratio is 10% or not of GDP. The agenda is a tax exemption removal agenda, which the government is trying to pursue, at least on the corporate side. It's due to happen soon. Let's take this issue of inequality.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, we do not have data on income distributions on a regular basis. We have data on distributions of consumption expenditure. One of the aggregate measures of inequality is the Gini coefficient, which also hides several things because it's an aggregate measure. What's the consumption inequality as per the Gini coefficient? It's about 3.2, 3.3, 3.4. Rural India, it's about 3.2. Urban India, it's about 3.5. Even if I assume, even if I accept the argument that inequality in the distribution of income is going to be higher, what would be the inequality in the distribution of income as per the Gini coefficient? It would be 0.42, 0.43, something like that. That is not something to be alarmed about yet. But the more important question is not what is the inequality, but what do you do about it? And the fundamental reason for the inequality is, as Thomas himself said, there are 100,000 villages where you still don't have all kinds of public goods and services. So that's the agenda. The agenda is not this red herring of what is the Gini coefficient.
Do you want to quickly come in on that, and then I'll take it to Arvind?
Right, but to finance this investment, you need, the proper tax revenue, and you need more transparency. I think the Indian elite has to face the fact that right now, we don't really know, we don't even know how many taxpayers each year, have between 10 and 20
You've
million
been complaining
rupees,
about this gap in the data for a long time.
I think, this has to change. We have to understand why this has happened for so long. We need to understand why in a country that has passed a Right to Information Act 10 years ago, we've had 15 years without proper income tax statistics. So maybe this is going to change today. It will be time. Let me just say one thing. I think we underestimate inequality in India by a lot when we look at household survey. I think inequality is gravely under measured in household survey, which are based only on self-reported information. And in every country in the world where I have been able to use other source of data, more reliable source of data, even in countries where the income tax system is not working very well and there's a lot of tax evasion, you still get a much higher level of inequality with the administrative tax data than with the household survey. So I think the view that we have about the Gini coefficient in India, which is supposed to be a sort of intermediate inequality level country, is far too optimistic about where India
So let's first pick up what you said about no access to reliable data, income tax data in particular. How did it go missing? Why is it missing?
No, these things happened in the past way before my time, so I have no clue why it happened. But I think that we will do our best to kind of make this more, because I think it's important to understand the problem, and I think that's a fair point that we will try. And I think this government is committed to that. But I want to come back to the points that Thomas and Vivek raised. I think that if my small disagreement with Thomas is that I think the relationship between growth and inequality, and I think everyone would agree, goes both ways. I think that Thomas is a very strong proponent of the view that if you attack inequality, you will get more. It's good for politics, it's good for economics as well, and I think that's a fair point. But I think equally, we know that if growth increases, that's going to have a first-order effect on poverty reduction.
But his argument is that wealth creation doesn't necessarily lead to...
No, I think the evidence in India is that,
greater equality.
No, I think in the period that
we want to have both. I think we don't want to choose between growth and equality. We need both.
So it's a two-way relationship. That's why I don't think you say one or the other. But I think in terms of policy choices, what Vivek was saying is exactly right. I think that, what is it that we need to... And I think we're all in agreement on that. We need much more, public investment in all the services, whether it's health, education, power, roads, law and order. It's a kind of public investment agenda that we can all...
But we have seen some cuts, in fact, in social sector spending, given the argument that a lot of the revenue of the states has increased, and now the states can spend from their available resources. Vivek?
No, this again, my problem is that much of the debate is completely misinformed. Take health.
Yes.
First, I'm not disagreeing with his figures, but the figure he gave is public expenditure. If you include private expenditure also, the expenditure on health is probably about 4 to 4.5% of GDP. But let's not get into that. Where is health in the Constitution? It is in the 7th schedule, bang in the state list. It's not even on the concurrent list. So why do I look at the union government's expenditure on health and say health expenditure has been slashed? If I want to make that argument, let me look at the state government's budgetary expenditure also. And I repeat, half the people who talk about this do not realize that health is not even in the concurrent list.
So are you saying,
it's squarely in the
are
state
you saying
list.
It's the responsibility of the states?
It is, as per the constitution, until you change the constitution.
And that is, in a sense, when you increase the revenues of the states or the tax collections and you shared more with the states, you were reminding the states that it's your job to spend. But doesn't Thomas have a point, and we can disagree on this, that when Vivek also computes the private health spending, that's not quite the same as what a state owes its citizens on health?
So I think that, remember, I think Vivek's point becomes even more important in the context of the 14th Finance Commission recommendations, where we allocated more of the resources to the states. So in that sense, given the Constitution and given the fact that we've devolved more resources, I think the point is that more and more of the responsibility of this has naturally to go to the states.
Let me just put something to you and then Tomas can come in. Raghuram Rajan, speaking at Davos, told us that he believes corporate debt is a huge problem. And when corporates, and some of the top 10 Indian corporates are in debt, when they, and I'm quoting him, when they flaunt yachts and have lavish parties, the messaging is all wrong. And when you juxtapose that with the argument that corporate tax has actually been reduced, it would speak to Tomas's narrative that corporates are getting an easier ride while the state is cutting down on social sector spending. I know you disagree, I'm just saying the narrative then, you join the dots.
The statement is not correct.
Which one?
The statement is not correct.
Which
the
one?
Corporate tax rate is not going to be reduced. The effective tax rate for corporates will actually go up. Don't focus on the 30 to 25.
Okay.
Focus on the effective corporate tax rate.
And exemptions are being
But what do you
eliminated.
think about this flaunting of wealth? Flaunting of wealth from corporates who are in debt. This is the RBI governor speaking.
Yeah, but that's a private thing. It's not something that I can, if private people are flaunting their wealth, I as a public civil servant,
No. Private people who owe banks money.
Yeah.
Are flaunting their wealth. Not private people who don't owe anybody money are flaunting their wealth. They're two different scenarios.
I think that to the extent that we have this problem of, the whole debt resolution, I think it needs to be done in a way that we apportion the cost of those mistakes and those decisions fairly between all those people who contributed to it. And that's why we need,
So explain that.
So for example, the whole, the PPP projects that, of the past that have been, the whole stalled projects phenomenon. I think it's come about because of a variety of factors, right? There was over-exuberance. In some cases, the external environment changed. In some cases, bad decisions were made by bankers. So I think that and of course, equity holders also made bad decisions for which they must be responsible. But I think that we need a process, and that's what the government is doing by uninstalling these projects. We need a process for the bankruptcy procedure is another example of that. We need a procedure and institutions for fairly apportioning the cost of those mistakes and then move on.
So you don't agree with making a value judgment, either of you, on corporates who are spending money while owing money?
No, but there's an important point that I want to make in this connection. You see, this issue arises because the assets and liabilities of an enterprise can be delinked from those of the individual, which is the entire limited liability concept.
Yes.
The reason the bankruptcy law is important is that's only true of the corporate sector. For MSME, the small and medium enterprises, even today, the assets and liabilities of the enterprise are not delinked from those of the individual. So the signaling part, I'm not reacting to the signaling part.
But neither of you are speaking directly on what Raghuram Rajan has said.
No.
Do you agree? Do you disagree?
No. Look, I cannot comment on behalf of Raghuram.
Not on behalf, on your behalf, on your own behalf.
I think wealth creation is good for society, wealth creation is good for everyone, and you made tons of money, you go flaunt it. It's none of my business.
Right. But if you owe the banks money, should you flaunt it? I think that's
no,
what
but
he's contesting.
that is why I brought in limited liability.
I think it's fair to say that the financial system is sometimes, biased towards the big players in a way that is not, acceptable. And I think, I don't know much about the Indian case, but I think this is certainly true in India in a number of situations. Regarding corporate taxation, let me say that, the argument that you can always reduce the statutory tax rate, but that the effective tax rate will increase, so there's no problem. We have to be careful with this argument, because this argument is always made by people who want to cut the statutory tax rate, and above a certain point, you can see that if you really cut the statutory tax rate to very low level, that's not going to do much good to your tax revenue. So let me just say that, in Europe, there are countries which now have gone below 10% of corporate tax rate.
We're nowhere there, Thomas.
You start, you go to 25, and then in 5 years you will say, I want to go to 20, and then to 15. I know this trend, I've seen it. And at the end of the day, you end up in a situation where the large corporations, in particular, end up paying, very limited tax on their profits in the country, and less than what the small and medium-sized companies, and less when the middle class and bottom class are paying. So we want to be sure about the statement you make about effective tax rate. We cannot take it as granted. The other point I wanted to make about the controversy about the state versus union spending.
Yes.
I think if I'm not going to get into the controversy, the constitutional controversy for India, but if you put all public health spending together, both from the union government and the state government, you get to about 1% of GDP, all together. I'm sorry, these are the best estimate we have. 1.2%.
We don't have a figure. That's the problem.
Well, the best estimate I've seen by Dres, Sen, other researchers, are that you are somewhere between 1.3% of GDP. Even if we are not sure about, the exact, 1.5, we are sure about one thing, is that, in China you have 3 to 3.5%.
And we are not anywhere near that.
Health outcomes in India are not as good as they should be. Agreed.
Yes.
Is it a public expenditure problem alone? No, I don't think it is. It may be a public expenditure problem, it's much more a public delivery problem. And the issue is that sitting in Delhi, we have been arguing that here is a centralized template which, regardless of which part of India, I am going to superimpose. So Kerala uses PHCs, primary health centers. Every state in the country must use PHCs. That need not be the case. A state like Tamil Nadu or a state like my Gujarat might say that I will never be able to get the physical infrastructure of the primary health center in place, and even if I do that, I will not get the doctors, I will not get the paramedics. So instead, let me adopt a model, I am simplifying of course, where my issue is to ensure that the patient gets basic treatment there and then is referred to the district hospital. So I fix the transport problem. Now this is the issue.
Let me give you a recent example of how the state may fail its citizens, but that can impact their political rights. And I'm talking about decisions in Haryana and Rajasthan to actually disenfranchise or I would say stop people at the panchayat level from contesting elections if they don't have a minimum educational cutoff. Right? Now, it could be argued, Arvind, and I know this can be argued both ways, but it could be argued that it is the state's duty to deliver education to all. And if the state fails in that role, should people be penalized in exercising their political rights for something that the state failed to do? How do either of you see what's happening in Haryana and Rajasthan?
Yeah.
Haryana and Rajasthan would take us off on a tangent. But
isn't it connected to the inequality debate?
No, I would phrase it in the following fashion. There is a big difference between saying that the state must provide education or health and saying the state must finance education and health. There is a very important difference between the two. For people who are poor, the state indeed needs to subsidize and finance. That does not mean that the state has to physically provide and run the schools and the primary health centers, because had that been the case, so many decades after independence, we would not have been sitting here and debating this issue. The history of the six odd decades after independence has been this public provisioning driven model which has not worked.
Well, this has not worked in India, but this is what has worked in the rest of the world. So I think at some point it's important, to look at what works, what doesn't work, and I don't know if you compare private health provision and public health provision in the world. What I can tell you is that compare US and Europe, you have private health provision in the US. It costs a lot more, and in terms of health outcomes, life expectancy, anything, is just not working. And I think anybody looking at the health systems that are working or not working, will come to this same conclusion. So look, I think it's important here to escape from ideology and try to see where is it that public provision can work, and I think in health and education, again, if you put 3 times less money than countries at comparable development levels, this cannot work.
But I think on the other point that Thomas makes about this whole public-private provision and saying in the West we had public provision, I think it's a really hard question that I think Western economists take state capacity as given and just believe that you can kind of improve it at the drop of a hat, and this is where his delivery point comes in. So the question is that what happens if in our situation, for various historical reasons, our state capacity is limited, then the choices of financing versus provision actually, and what the state should do, where it should focus its energies on, become very important, and that's, I think, the spirit of what Vivek is saying. So I don't know enough about these areas to say, oh my God, it should be private, or oh my God, it should all be public like in the West. But I think state capacity is a very, very scarce good in India. and how best to deploy that is something that I think we need to think much more deeply about.
But
It's not just state capacity, it's state resources also, because implicitly in all of this is a prioritization of resources. Just sort of back of the envelope. A lot of people argue expenditure on health should be increased, education should be increased. Education, public expenditure should be 6% of GDP, standard argument. Health should be 4% of GDP, 10%. Infrastructure should be 10% of GDP, that's already 20% of GDP. Let's say a tax GDP ratio of 20%. Are we arguing therefore that the government should do absolutely nothing else? No defense, nothing? The point I'm flagging is, before saying on ABC expenditure should be this, you also need to say where that money is going to come from very clearly. The money is not, it's not just capacity which is not infinite, resources are also not infinite.
Thomas, do you want to come in there?
Building state capacity is of course a gradual process. I'm certainly not saying that India is going to become Sweden next year. So this has to be a gradual process. Yeah. But a gradual process doesn't mean that a flat process where we do nothing. We have to go in this direction. So I think again, when you have a 6-7% growth rate, the experience in the West is that this is the time where gradually, year after year, you can put an additional 1% of GDP into the state capacity. Certainly not more. You want most of the growth to remain in the private sector, but you want to increase state capacity right at this time. And at the same time, you want to build more trust into the tax system, more transparency.
Arvind, we can't let you go without asking you contemporary concerns here. On one hand, you have, Thomas arguing inheritance tax, wealth tax. On the other hand, we're struggling for a single tax system with the GST. Do you believe that with your standard rate that you've recommended in your committee, 17 to 18%, do you believe that the Congress is right in saying put that into the Constitution? A. B. Have you more or less given up on the goods and service tax coming by the April 1st deadline?
No, I think that putting any tax rate in the maximum tax rate in the Constitution is a completely I would say it's an outrageous kind of recommendation. No country puts tax rates in its constitution for very, very good reasons. Things can change. Maybe we want to tax some commodities more than the standard rate, etc. On the second, no, I think the government has not given up hope on this, and we're hoping very much that we will still see the GST see the light of day, very much so.
And the value of the rupee against the dollar. Quick comment on that as we end.
No, these are determined by market forces, and we have the RBI in charge of that, and I'm not going to comment on the level of the rupee.
So what wealth tax, inheritance tax? Any comment?
Inheritance tax.
Are there any more questions?
No, inheritance tax. Take that because he's been arguing that a lot.
I am against that.
You're against that?
If I tax income properly, that's the increment. I don't think we should be taxing.
So should you pay more tax when you make 1 million rupees with your incomes and when you receive 1 million rupees from your parents? I think when you receive money from your parents without working,
because my parents have paid the income tax.
Right, but look,
you should have another debate on this.
Look,
my parents have paid on that.
Right, but maybe this was 50 years ago. Maybe
doesn't matter. I only tax income.
Okay, so when you make money on your own, you pay more than when you receive it. Maybe there was no income tax when they made the money 100 years ago, 50 years ago.
When the Income Tax Act in India has been there since 1961.
Now, look, you should pay less tax with the money you make
by
yourself.
Well, this one we will disagree.
Okay, what does the Chief Economic Advisor think on inheritance tax very quickly?
Is 0% enough? That's the
no,
question.
I've not thought about this. I've just written a report on the GST and I feel more comfortable answering.
On GST, is Chidambaram right in saying Arvind agrees with 2 of the 3 Congress demands?
I mean, the committee clearly said, gave the R&R, which was low. We did not agree on the fact of it being in the Constitution. And what was the third point? The third point was
judicial.
No, that was not in our remit in any case. So we didn't get into that.
And the sin tax is being called for colas. You have the cola companies in a tizzy.
As we said, we did not change any of the structure of taxes. They were what they are currently, because these are political decisions that will be made by the GST Council going forward.
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Thomas Piketty, Arvind Subramanian, Vivek Debroy, pleasure to have you on this program.
Thank you.